Welcome to the Plain Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Port. A little bit later in the show, we're going to be talking with a gentleman who represents the film industry in the state, the media industry in the state. They want incentives to help bring, film crews and other sorts of production to our state. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? We'll discuss that a little bit later in the show. But before we get there, some interesting developments at the North Dakota Department of Transportation. Now, if you've been following this in the headlines or on sayanythingblog.com, you know that the former, he resigned last week, director of the driver's license division, a gentleman by the name of Glenn Jackson, he had been on leave since February because he was under investigation. And that investigation was related to accusations that he had done a number of things wrong, up to and including, treating female staff differently than other staff, maybe paying a little bit too much attention to young female staff, giving a raise and I guess that not a promotion, but the potential for a promotion to one particular staff member. In fact, this gentleman who I guess is a side gig writing self-published novels, which he publishes on Amazon, at one point told one of these women that he reminded her of a character from one of his romance novels. He also, I guess when one employee had gone in and had done a performance assessment meeting, afterwards he told her, he complimented her on her looks and then did that hourglass shape with his hands. You know what I'm talking about. If that behavior is true, certainly inappropriate. Mr. Jackson, again, he had been on leave since February of this year, and he ultimately resigned last week. Now, this is where things get a little interesting. And if you want to check out the backstory on that, you can see the full investigation report. I have it posted at sayanythingblog.com. Now, what's interesting about this is what Mr. Jackson's job is. Part of it is signing certifications when you get a DUI and the state acts against your driving privileges. The DOT's involved in that. A lot of people maybe don't understand this, but when you get charged with a DUI, there are essentially two different proceedings that are initiated against you. One is the criminal proceeding, which most of us are familiar with, where you go to court and you get found guilty and all of that stuff. Found guilty, that is, if you did it and the police did their job right. The other proceeding against you is a civil proceeding, and it's actually against your driving privileges, because driving is a privilege and not a right, and the state of North Dakota can remove your driver's license and in this instance suspend or revoke your driver's license, depending on the circumstances, for driving under driving under the influence, driving while inebriated. So a question here are those hearings. They're held in front of an administrative law judge if you challenge it. But essentially what happens is if you challenge it, you go before the administrative law judge and the DOT presents, their information and you present your information, and then the judge decides whether or not your license gets suspended. Now, part of that process is the DOT, basically handing over records pertaining to the DUI charge. And part of those records going over, part of the exhibits, is a certification that the records being sent over are accurate, are a true and accurate copy. And the person who signs that certification, or at least has signed some certifications, is Glenn Jackson, formerly division director of the driver's license division for the Department of Transportation. Now, here's the thing. Mr. Jackson, we know, was on suspension, I guess, was on leave, pending that investigation from February of this year through last week, early May. I have a certification that a defense attorney provided to me. Now, I'm not going to use their names or use the name of the defendant because their case doesn't really have anything to do with the story at hand. But just as an example, Mr. Jackson's signature, or what purports to be Mr. Jackson's signature, is on this certification. So, according to the Department of Transportation, Mr. Jackson signed a certification for this administrative law hearing, and the date is April 26, 2019, during his suspension. Now, how was it, if he was suspended, that he was able to sign that certification? And if he wasn't suspended, who signed it? And why is the DOT purporting that that person who signed it is Mr. Jackson? Is this a case of forgery? Because if you look at the document and you can see a screenshot of the certification at sayanythingblog.com, what you see is a signature block, and it says Glenn Jackson, and it has a scribble, which by all indications is Mr. Jackson's signature. There's no indication that a third party signed it. There's no indication that anybody else signed it. So what's going on here? All pertinent questions for the Department of Transportation, right? So I asked the Department of Transportation. I sent them over an email to their spokesperson, Jamie Olson, and I asked her, what's going on with this? Was some third party signing Jackson's signature? How is his signature being applied to these records when he was on suspension or on leave? And who is certifying that these records are actually true and accurate, if not Mr. Jackson, the person who purportedly signed it, but maybe shouldn't have signed it because he was supposed to have been on leave, or maybe somebody else signed it? I don't know. I asked all those questions, and this is what I got back. I quote, "Per your recent email, we have been advised by our legal staff that it is department policy for employees to not discuss matters that may be subject to litigation or other controversy unless subpoenaed." Which is to say, essentially, that they're not going to respond to this. Now, I've filed a bunch of open records requests because I want to get to the bottom of it because, well, it's kind of an interesting question, isn't it? Who signed these documents? Why is a state official who is supposed to be on leave, who is supposed to be under investigation, why is he signing certifications for records in legal proceedings relating to people's driving privileges? This is an important question, because if somebody's just signing his signature, well then, I mean, that's not the truth. That's, I'm going to use the word fraud here, not in the legal sense, but I mean, it's deceptive, right? I mean, you're purporting that somebody signed the document who didn't sign the document. And it's kind of a big deal, because if you're going to purport, like, listen, I'm signing this and I'm certifying that these records are accurate, and then it turns out that person didn't actually sign it, or somebody else signed it, well, then that's a problem. The other problem is if Mr. Jackson was still working when he was supposedly on leave because he was being investigated for his treatment of female employees, well, that's a problem too, isn't it? It's an interesting thing going on at the Department of Transportation, and well, I'll keep you up to date on it. I have a feeling that the bottom of the story is going to be very, very interesting. My interview about film credits coming up next. This episode of the Plain Talk Podcast is brought to you by Energy of North Dakota. Oil and natural gas from North Dakota strengthens all of America. And through our abundance of talents, innovations, and technologies, energy responsibly produced here translates to worldwide economic stability. With producers and our communities working together, we're securing a sustainable future that generation after generation can build on. It's all happening right now with Energy of North Dakota. Learn more at energyofnorthdakota.com. Dave Diebel joins me now. He is a producer and co-owner of DN Cinematics, a North Dakota-based company. He's also a board member of the North Dakota Film and Media Association. He is advocating for incentives for filming in the state of North Dakota. Now, if you've ever watched some of your favorite shows or your favorite movies, at the end, a lot of times in the credits, they'll have something like where they're thanking the state of Georgia is a real common one, or they'll be thanking, like, Vancouver in Canada, or, some local board or entity or government or whatever, which provides incentives or in other ways facilitates the ability of filmmakers to come there and film. And Dave, my understanding is you want to do something like that locally here in North Dakota. You want North Dakota to provide that sort of facilitation for filmmakers to come and produce and create in our state.
Yeah, well, and at this point, so we want our legislators and lawmakers to just take a look. We feel that, over the years in this business, we see time and time again where we feel that maybe there's opportunity that's being missed by North Dakota as a state. And so what we want at this moment is just for our legislators to go through that discovery process, see maybe some options that would work for North Dakota. So what are other states around the area doing? Are they experiencing success? Are they not? What's working and what could work here?
So there's some fraught history with this sort of thing in North Dakota. Years and years ago, there was a film called Woolly Boys with I think it was Chris Christopherson and Peter Fonda were in it. It's not a bad film. I've seen it, but they've got some financing from the Bank of North Dakota, and they ended up defaulting on the loan. And I think the state ended up having to eat a few $1 million. And ever since then, I don't know that there's been a lot of political appetite for this sort of thing. I think policymakers in our state feel like they got burned a little bit, and they haven't wanted to touch this. And we've seen efforts in previous legislative sessions to maybe try to put some sort of incentives in place, and they've been defeated. So what's the key to turning people's heads on this? How do you convince people that this is a good idea? This is a road we want to go down?
Certainly, and the Woolly Boys example, it's unfortunate that happened, and you're right. I think people have a bad taste in their mouth, but that was in 2001, so almost 20 years ago. Yeah. So I think it's time that we revisit the topic a little bit. I mention this all the time that our state colleges and universities and our private colleges and universities have a lot of these high-tech programs where they're teaching our students how to create content, be it video or audio or animation or whatever. And so we have these great training programs. We're putting the dollars into that, and then when the students are done, there's not the jobs here. So it could be, like I said, a burgeoning industry here in North Dakota, similar to what we've done with the drones and the UAV technology. There's tons of jobs where, again, in just content creation, and that's only going to become more. I mean, we're all aware of just the deluge of content that's out there, so it's not going away. And like I said, I feel, like I said, just in our experience over the years doing what we do and being in this industry, we see it time and time again where, we'll talk to companies from, all over the nation, and they'll say, oh, I would have loved to have shot in North Dakota, but, number one, the incentive isn't there. Number two, the infrastructure isn't there. There aren't the network and the base of professionals that we need. There's just not enough in North Dakota.
What, I mean, is that a concern? Because I think most of us, and maybe I'm thinking this one-dimensionally, because I don't really know your business at all. I consume a lot of TV shows and movies, but I don't really know the business end of it. I'm just on the consumer end watching the stuff and like some of it, don't like some of it. So I don't really know how this works. I think most of us, when we discuss this policy, we think that we want to attract like Hollywood crews or other sorts of like movie and TV crews to come to our state and film. I mean, is that pretty much it? Or are there other aspects to this that we're missing when we think about this?
I mean, that's definitely part of it. So I'll give you, for instance, so this week we were working on a nationwide commercial for a car manufacturer. And so they were here in Bismarck shooting. And what we're trying to say is, so this was just, like a 30-second commercial, right? So they were here for a couple of days. It was a crew of about 20 or 30 people. They were eating, they were staying at our hotels, they were renting equipment, they were renting vehicles. So the economic boost that we saw from literally a 30-second commercial, think of what could happen if there was an actual series like Fargo shot, in North Dakota, or if there was a feature film. What we're saying is that it's not just necessarily even the direct industries, it's all the auxiliary businesses and industries around a film production that could also benefit from this. And like I said, pumping those dollars into our local communities, utilizing what we have in North Dakota as far as scenery and open space. And also, we have the luxury of not having a lot of red tape or regulation around producing content in North Dakota. There's not a lot of permitting or anything that goes into it. You can kind of just, run with it. And so, how do we take advantage of that more as a state?
And I got to think there would be, I mean, you were talking about, we have these programs that are universities that are producing people who are interested in media and the arts. I got to think that if we're bringing these crews in from out of state, that's going to create some opportunities. Because a lot of times, I got to think that they want to hire some local people too, some on the ground people to do, I don't know, advance work or to do runner work or to help facilitate their work in the state. So if you're one of these students and one of these crews come in, you can maybe, catch on with them, do a little work for them, and maybe it creates some opportunities. I think there's a lot of stuff that's possible once they're here. There's just a lot of good things that can happen around it.
Exactly. Yep, that's exactly the case. Is when productions come to the state, there's opportunity for, local companies and businesses, and like I said, ones that you might not even think. It's caterers, and it's car rental and gas stations and everything else that can benefit from it. And right now, like I said, it's a trickle. We get the occasional job here and there, but it's hard to produce things in North Dakota. Just as far as getting people here, basically you have to start from the ground up. There isn't the infrastructure around it because there hasn't been an industry that we focused on as a state.
So what do incentive? We keep talking about that we want to create some sort of incentive. What does that look like specifically? Is it like tax breaks? Is it like are we giving them money? I mean, what does incentive mean?
It can mean any number of things. And that's what we want to take a look at is what are our neighboring states doing? What's Minnesota doing? What's South Dakota doing? What's Montana doing? There's a good resource, and I'll have to send it to you, but it's a list of every state and what kind of incentives they offer as far as producing film or video in their state. And so it ranges from tax credits. The way Minnesota did it is that there was just a pool of funding set aside, and for every dollar you're spending, you see some of that as a return. And so that, as a production, you can say to your investors, look, hey, if we make this in North Dakota, we'll spend X amount of dollars, and then our return is this already before it even goes to distribution or that kind of thing. And that's what really, incentivizes huge productions to do anything in various states. That's Georgia's had a lot of success, as you've mentioned. Series like The Walking Dead are shot there. Utah started a few years back with more aggressive incentives, and I know I think the example is given of Blood and Oil, which was supposed to be set in North Dakota.
Boy,
that was in Utah.
Yeah. I made a lot of fun of that show because we're in North Dakota, they say, with like the jagged rocky mountains in the background. Like,
exactly.
No,
yep, exactly.
No, not quite. That's not what Williston looks like at all.
Exactly.
So it'd be nice if some of these shows that were actually set in North Dakota could maybe be filmed in North Dakota. I think that would be a benefit. Now, there's always a concern, though, that this is going to, I mean, obviously the entertainment industry, this is a hugely profitable industry. I think there's a lot of taxpayers who are saying, why do we need to give them anything? They're a hugely profitable industry. Why did the taxpayers need to pony up anything for them?
Sure. I definitely understand, but it's a matter of staying competitive with other states. I don't know the history behind who was the first one to start trying to drive people to their state to create content, but unfortunately now it's everybody. And so just to stay competitive, we need to maybe take a look at what we can do to attract productions. And like I said, again, support a burgeoning industry. Like I said, we've fostered that in UAS technology here in North Dakota, and this is something that we have our staples of energy and agriculture and that kind of thing. Why not see if there's opportunity in something like film production?
Dave, thanks for your time.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
That's it for today's Plain Talk podcast. New episodes come out Monday through Friday, right away in the morning. If you're listening to this podcast on a platform that allows you to rate or review, if you would leave an honest rating and an honest review, every new rating review helps other people find the podcast. So that's really a big deal. If you have any feedback on the show, if you want to talk to me directly about it, you can certainly email me, rob@sayanythingblog.com, as a lot of you have been doing. I thank you for all the feedback. If you want to follow me on social media, you could do so. I'm at Rob Port on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook. I'm Rob Port. Say Anything Blog has accounts on Facebook and Twitter as well. Follow those. And thank you for listening. I appreciate it. We'll talk again.